Welcome to the SImple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. I'm your host, Shannon Ables, and whether you're listening on your commute, exercising, working in the garden, or sitting down with a hot cup of tea or a cafe au lait, thank you for tuning in. Let's get started. Welcome to the 40th episode of the SImple Sophisticate. Today we are going to talk about how to become the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of your own. With 8 specific ways, I am going to show you how you can curate the life that is best fit for you to help you reach your full potential and to make sure that it is for you and inspired by your talents, your passions, your view of the world that you live in. But before I get to that, I want to share a review that was left on iTunes by a JHT Realtor shares. I have never actually written a review for podcasts before, but after the most recent episode about real estate, I had to leave one. As a real estate agent, I wish that all of my clients, buyers, sellers, current and future homeowners would listen. I will be emailing out and posting on social media. I adore the weekly practice for living a luxurious life. Thank you for reminding me to wear my good blouse and use. I only wish there were daily episodes. Thank you, JHT Realtor. I really do appreciate your comments. And I want to comment on a few things. First of all, she's speaking about last week's podcast, the similarities between dating and selling a home. And I'll have a link to that on today's show notes. But she also mentioned a few other things I want to comment. The success that the blog, The Simply Luxurious Life, and this podcast, The SImple Sophisticate, has had is due in large part to you, the listeners and the readers. You guys share what you find and what you enjoy, and I cannot be more appreciative for that. That is the grandest compliment, and anytime a reader emails me and says that they have shared this particular post with a friend or family member, I say the same thing. That is the biggest compliment I could ever receive. We share what we love, and we don't want to waste anyone's time. And so I just want to thank you for spreading the word. The last thing that she shared on her comment is something I want to comment on and share with you guys, the listeners, about the potentially more episodes each week. There will be a second episode shared each week, and we haven't decided yet whether it's going to be Friday. But beginning in the summer, we haven't solidified the date, but it's looking like July, there will be a second episode. And we're really kind of fine-tuning everything right now, but you can look forward to a second episode every week here on the SImple Sophisticate. So a great thank you to the commenter for their feedback. I sincerely appreciate that. Thank you for tuning in. And for if you've ever shared or tweeted a link and gotten the word out to your friends and followers and family, I want to say, speaking of listeners, you guys are always giving me great recommendations and ideas. And this week's Petit Plaisir is one that was shared with me by a listener. And I am so excited to recommend it as I went and checked this film out, loved it. And I think as a Francophile, you will too. So be sure to stay tuned for this week's Petit Plaisir at the end of today's episode. With that said, though, we want to get into today's episode, and I have 8 ways to become the CEO of your own life. Each of our lives is going to be different. Each of our lives will be designed to fit us, to fit our, like I said before, our passions and our pursuits, what it is we want to achieve in our lives. So let's kick it off with a quote that actually is on the back of my book, Choosing the Simply Luxurious Life, A Modern Woman's Guide. It speaks to just this fact. Quote, "Women have never had so many options, yet we often experience a kind of paralysis, an unconscious willingness to follow societal dictates rather than become the CEOs of our own lives. When we mindlessly follow the dots, we smother our innate gifts and miss opportunities to fulfill our true potential." So with that said, you and I are going to become, and probably are already on our way, if not already established, this idea of being the CEO of our own lives. Whether it's in our work or in our play, we can do this, and we should do this, because ultimately we are the ones that will control our destiny. So here we go. Let's get started. Number one is look beyond others' approval. I want to begin this particular section with a look at psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg's moral level of reasoning, meaning what is it that determines the decisions we make in our lives? And he created this whole concept in the mid-20th century, inspired by Jean Piaget's definition of what motivates us to do things, but he takes it a little bit deeper. And I bring this up every year when I teach To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, because one of my favorite quotes that I have in my classroom is, what would Atticus do? And the first part of the year, my students, don't know who Atticus is, most of them. And they're like, who, what, why? And I'm just like, just wait until we read To Kill a Mockingbird. And then that quote becomes much more clear. And at the end of the novel, we talk about this concept of where would each of the characters fall on Kohlberg's hierarchy of moral development with regards to reasoning and making decisions. And then I ask them to place themselves on the levels and determine why they fall there, their reasoning. And then the final part of the assignment is to have them analyze themselves and figure out one way they could elevate themselves to the next level, whatever that level may be, should they not be at the top. Now, there are 6 levels, and I just want to kind of briefly explain to you what they are so you can know what I'm talking about. I'll also leave a very detailed description of them on today's show notes, podcast 40. So the first level is simply trying to avoid pain and punishment. This is all about survival and is the lowest level on the decision-making process. Number 2 is that you're simply doing whatever it is you're doing to get a reward. We're talking, it could be monetary, could be materialistic. You're just doing it to get a reward. Nothing else matters. Third level is to gain approval from others. And that's why, in order to be the CEOs of our own life, we cannot fall prey to doing whatever it is we do in our lives to get the approval of others. Who are these people? Doesn't mean they're good or bad. They're probably a mixture of both with regards to their intentions. But level 3 is simply following the social norms and not questioning why they are the way they are and simply just going along. It's being the sheep and not living for our own goals, not living for realizing our own potential. So that's number 3. Number 4 is to avoid penalty by the law. So you're simply doing whatever you do to follow the rules of that particular law system, that governance society. So if the speed limit is 55, you go 55. You don't question why you should go 55, you just go 55. The 5th one, which is post-conventional, is to act for the welfare of others. And I always bring up the example of Martin Luther King Jr. here with regards to his letter from the Birmingham jail. He speaks to this idea of civil disobedience, which we all have known now in our society based on his example and Gandhi's example, and now obviously thousands of others. But this idea that there are times when we must break the law because the laws are unjust. And that is what we're talking about with regards to level 5, which level 5 and 6, which I'll share in a second, is all about post-conventional ideas, meaning you're thinking beyond the conventional ideas in society. For whatever reason, you have your reasoning, and that's going to maybe differ from one person to the next. But the example of Martin Luther King is because the laws are unjust. And the 6th and final is the highest, and it's this idea that you are making decisions based on a set of self-formulated principles. No one else has created them. You're not following anyone else's dictates on how to live. You are following your own dictates based on what you feel is best for yourself, but mainly because it's best for society as a whole. You're thinking beyond yourself. And that's why we talk about Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird, because Atticus Finch sits at that level 6 in the eyes of the readers once we get to the end of the novel. And it really is this idea of living the life based on what you feel is best for you and ultimately for society. What and how can you better society? Not following along. And so that's why number 1 is look beyond others' approval, because simply to live for the approval of others is to shortchange yourself, to limit your potential. Ultimately, living the simply luxurious life is to reach that 6th level, So long as you are living a life that is created by your self-formulated principles, something that allows you to reach your full potential and help society in the best way you can, is to reach that level, and everyone's will be different. That's why I always say this book is a guidebook. My blog is a resource guide for you to fundamentally find your foundation, but then you build the house, which is your life. You build the house. I can't tell you what your house is going to look like. One person's may be a Queen Anne, another person's may be a craftsman, and that's fine. Whatever it is, whatever plans you follow are yours and yours alone. Speaking of reaching that sixth level and designing a life that is yours and yours alone, there is a book I've been wanting to talk about for quite some time, and I shared it on my Instagram a few months ago. The book's main focus is on those who have chosen not to have children. And it defends the idea that those making this decision are the furthest thing from being selfish, shallow, or self-absorbed, as stated in the title. Many women struggle with this idea of whether they should or shouldn't. And too many women feel they should have them when some of them just don't want them. And there's others that absolutely want them and are doing it purely because they genuinely want to be a mother. But I think there's a lot of angst out there and a lot of pressure for women who choose not to because they sincerely don't want to, but they feel that they appear to society as though they are being selfish. And so I want to speak to that because a book came out recently titled Selfish, Shallow, and Self-Absorbed, 16 Writers on the Decision Not to Have Kids. And 16 different writers, as it says in the title, share their experiences, but it's curated by Megan Daum, and I'll provide a link to it on today's show notes. And initially, when people see this title, they think, oh yeah, that's all about people that are not having kids. They are so selfish. Absolutely the opposite. This book is absolutely the opposite. And each of these writers address it in their own way, because I think ultimately we have to make the decision of whether we're going to have kids or not based on our own principles. And if we choose to have kids based on those, that's fantastic. We need good parents out there. As a teacher, I mean, obviously I see both sides of that, so I know how valuable that is. But we don't have to have kids. We shouldn't feel we have to have kids if it's not going to allow us to be our best selves. We each will contribute to society in our own way. And the key is to contribute positively. And I think we all are trying to do that. And sometimes it takes a long time to figure it out. But kudos and great applause to each of you who are doing it, who are trying to figure out how to contribute positively. I want to share with you a passage from one of the writers who contributed. Her name is Laura Kipnis, and she speaks to this idea that society says that it's natural for women to want to have kids. And she's like, wait a second. Quote, all I'm saying is that what we're calling biological instinct is a historical artifact, a culturally specific development, not a fact of nature. And if we look back in society, prior to the Industrial Revolution, for 12,000 years, we were an agrarian society. And because of that agrarian society, it required strength. And yes, a lot of men were more prone to that. And so the women, they needed to procreate. They needed children to take care of the farm. And the mortality rates were extremely high. So women and parents in general just simply needed children. And obviously there was no contraceptions. And so you have women who needed to stay home and take care of the kids. We needed that. But prior to those 12,000 years, we were in the hunter-gatherer phase. And if you look this up on various historical resources and studies, women were equal to men in how they were treated in society and by law and expectation of their roles as far as power or status. And I think it's very important that we understand the history of certain societies and determine what is natural and what's not. Yes, women are obviously the ones physically having the kids, but it doesn't mean that men and women cannot be equal roles with regards to raising kids. And it really is up to that particular couple, that particular family. And that's the other part of it as well. Who's to say that every person has to have kids? Just because they don't doesn't make them less in society. So long as each of us are contributing positively, so long as we're each contributing positively and doing our best, that's what should be most important. We should not be shaming people for not following the roles that we have set in our heads as to be the right or wrong way. That is commentary on who we are as an individual, not at all about the person we were commenting on. So I just want to kind of share that as an example of living your life according to your self-formulated principles. Do yourself the biggest favor and take the time to determine, why do I want this path for my life? Is it because I would feel uncomfortable going against society's dictates? Or is it because I sincerely want that path? That's what is the definition of the best life. That latter reason should be the one you follow. If it's not, keep getting to know yourself. Keep asking the question why. You will find your path. You will figure out what path is best for you. Whether it's the whole kids issue, to have or not to have, or it's the whole role of, should I get married, should I not get married, or this job or that job, or the questions are endless, but the answers should be your own. The answers should be your own. And I'll provide a link to that particular book that I share, but I think it's fascinating. And for me, for someone who doesn't currently have kids, and quite honest, probably won't have kids, but I don't rule anything out, but I really have always tried to answer that question honestly. Why don't I gravitate to having kids? Where's that coming from? And is that okay? And heck yes, it's okay. Heck yes, it's okay. I need to make sure I'm doing it for me and not to get approval or to simply be the black sheep, because either one of those reasons is not a good idea. So that's number one, a long number one on how to become the CEO of your own life. The other ones will be shorter, I promise. Here we go. Number two, pursue your path with determination. Now, on Friday, I shared with you one of the books I was going to be reading, and I devoured this particular book. It's called Girl Boss by Sophia Amoruso, and she is the founder and CEO of Nasty Gal. And this book came out earlier this year, and I will provide a link on the show notes, but I devoured it in one day. It was absolutely fantastic. Now, she's a completely different individual than I am with regards to aesthetics and style, but she is not different when it comes to pursuing a life created by you. And I think you will enjoy this book immensely. She does not tell you to follow her path with regards to what she is interested in, what she believes with regards to aesthetics and style. But what she does offer is invaluable advice on how to become the boss of your own life and to be quite successful, as she understandably is. One of the things she talks about is this idea of, how are you going to get something if you don't ask for it? She's like, don't play coy. This is not dating in the chase, and don't say you're really interested. Share with your boss you're interested. Share with the potential boss you're interested. Share with the world that you're interested. Whatever it is you want, ask for it. Go out there, ask for it, pursue it. And just because you haven't heard from someone, a company or an employer, doesn't mean you can't contact them. She offers some fantastic advice on how to go about all this very diplomatically. But when it comes down to it, it's all about just showing interest, showing sincere interest, and letting them know that you're willing to work for whatever it is you want. And that just goes across the board with life. Whatever life that you want, just because it doesn't occur the first time you attempt to create it doesn't mean it won't. I truly believe that life wants to see if we really want something. So oftentimes it will shut the door, but it doesn't lock it. It doesn't lock it. It's just seeing if you'll knock again. It's just seeing if you're going to try one more time. And that's the key to creating your own life. So become that CEO. Number two is to pursue your path with determination. Number three is to care for your temple regularly. And with regards to temple, I'm talking about our bodies. I'm talking about our fitness. I'm talking about the health of our mind. I'm talking about our skin, just taking care of our being. So I really do look at it threefold. There's the physical with regards to having a regular exercise plan. There's the mental. We must have a strong mind, and we'll get to that in another point later on in today's episode. But we have to be able to be the master of our mind. Otherwise, if it has control over us, we don't know where it's going to take us. And the third one, simply with regards to presentation. After all, we are our own business card. When we walk into a room, we are our own business card. We need to sell ourselves, whether it's a business situation or not. So taking care of our skin, our hair, anything to do with our outer appearance. Now, this isn't about being superficial. It's about looking our best so we can forget about what we look like and therefore be confident in whatever it is we want to pursue. Each of these three parts of our temple, the inner, outer, and mental, have to do with sharpening the saw. What do I mean by that? Well, there's been a handful of articles out there, and I will share a link to one that was on the Huffington Post. But it's this idea that in order to be our most productive selves in life, whether it's coming up with a great idea in business, being the best person in the relationship, knowing how to listen well, keep our emotions under control, that is going to help us be more productive, and therefore more satisfied in our overall lives, whether it be professional or personal. So therefore, we have to make time to take care of our physicality, our health, inner and outer, and most importantly, our minds. We must get control of our minds. And so that is the sharpening of the saw. We have to take that time, take that extra 45 minutes, as the article goes into, to sharpen the saw so that you can cut through that piece of wood quicker. Whereas someone who's using a dull saw that doesn't take care of their health in this case, or take care of the saw in the allegory, is not going to get through that stump any sooner than someone who takes the time to invest 45 minutes of sharpening and boom, can get through that log just like that. So sharpen your saw. 3 levels: inner, outer, and mental. Number 4 is, as we just talked about, number 3, master your mind. In Sophia Amoruso's book, Girl Boss, she speaks and actually dedicates an entire chapter to this idea of the power of magical thinking. And the key is it's not magic, actually. It may seem like it is, but it's actually not. And here's a quote she shares. There's that kind of magic for sure, but there's also that everyday kind of magic that we make for ourselves. And that's really not magic at all. It's just recognizing the fact that we control our thoughts and our thoughts control our lives. This is very simple, but to practice it can be something that will take a lot of practice. I've talked about meditating before on the blog. I've talked about this whole concept of just controlling our thoughts so that it's positive rather than negative. Because as she says, quote, I also think you can end up ignoring and even losing the positive things in your life by focusing too much on the negative. So it's however you want to approach it to exercise your mind, do it, because it will pay off. Because that is really the engine or the motor for which direction you take and whether or not you believe you can achieve what you are pursuing. And that is something that she believes in wholeheartedly. So to end with another quote from Sophia Amoruso, she says, you have to kick people out of your head as forcefully as you'd kick someone out of your house if you did not want them to be there. So kick out those bad thoughts that are taking you down the wrong path. All right, that's number 4, master your mind. Okay, we have 4 more to get to on how to become the CEO of your own life. But I'm going to take a quick 1-minute intermission and I will see you on the other side. Welcome back. So for number 5 of how to be the CEO of your own life, we're going to talk about money. And what it is respect the power of money. Another quote from Girl Boss by Sophia Amoruso is, quote, money spells freedom. If you learn to control your finances, you won't find yourself stuck in jobs, places, or relationships that you hate just because you can't afford to go elsewhere. And she's absolutely correct. Money gives us freedom. It's not about having money to spend on all sorts of clothing and bigger houses and more cars. Absolutely not. The more you can make money work for you, the better. The security net that it can give you is invaluable. And one of the things that in a recent biography that came out last summer about Harper Lee was that the success of To Kill a Mockingbird gave her the ability to live the life she wanted. She wasn't beholden to her family expectations. After all, her father wanted her to be a lawyer and stay in town. She wasn't beholden to society's expectations with regards to what she should do as a woman from the South. And she was able to live on her own terms. And whether you want to live big or small, travel the world, or just stay in your own town all the time, you get to do that. And you get to live in a home that you feel safe and secure in, or not, if that's not what you want to do. You get to retire when you like, so you can live that second stage. You get to move when you want to, not when your house sells. Or there's so many things. There's just so many things. So respect the power of money. Work hard to get it. Keep working hard after you've gotten it, and use it in a way that allows you to sleep well at night. She shares a quote from Calvin Coolidge, and I'll share it here as well because it is true. Calvin Coolidge states, "There is no dignity quite so impressive and no independence quite so important as living within your means. Whatever that is, do so. And each stage you get to, continue to do so. And you'll be thankful that you did." So number 5, respect the power of money. Number 6, know how to market yourself. So you may not want to be an entrepreneur in the sense that you don't want to be your own boss, literally, but you will ultimately want to get the job you want to live the life that you desire. And that means you have to impress someone enough for them to want to hire you. And it starts with searching for that job and putting yourself out there. She goes over in Girl Boss a few ideas and pieces of advice, being a boss that she is, of what she likes in cover letters, resumes, interview styles, and also in how to work in a company successfully. And I'd like to share along with that my experience as well, having gone through the job process this year as well as last year, and then having worked in a handful of different places my whole life, just share what's worked and what people positively respond to and what they don't. So really quickly, with regards to the cover letter, which we all have to do, and it's just kind of pro form, but it's something that there are some key elements that everyone should adhere to. How you do it will be unique to you. But she points out that a cover letter is a peek, a glimpse for the employer into where you've been, where you are, and where you want to go. And the key here is to kick yourself out of it. And now you're like, what? How do I do that? How do I not talk about myself here? You are talking about yourself, but you're talking about yourself with regards to what you can bring to the company that you're applying to. So what do you and your skills and your experience and your passions have to offer that new business? And that's the key with a cover letter. Where you've been, where you are, where you want to go, and how that will benefit the company. And that is from Girl Boss. I will share a link in the show notes to this book so you can have a better look at it. With regards to the resume, everyone's going to follow a different format for resumes. I've heard advice where keep it to one side only. I've seen resumes that are 2 sides. That's going to depend on your particular job field. I think a lot of different fields have different expectations. But the key is to reveal what you've done, your accomplishments. Be very pointed about those things. This is where your strengths are going to shine. They want to hire someone who is an expert or has experience in certain things, because it's not about what you tell them and what you talk about. It's what you've done, what you've accomplished, and speak in straightforward terms. Obviously, you want to know the lingo to some degree, and that will come more alive in the interview and perhaps more in the cover letter. But the resume should be very simple, to the point, what you've done. Don't feel bad about bragging. Tell them that you know how to design a website. Tell them that you received an Oscar, if that's the case. Woohoo! But you get the idea. I joke a little bit there, but I don't as well. Be direct. They want someone like you in their company if you can bring that expertise, because it makes them look better. They perform better. They do well. The bar gets raised. The bar gets raised, and that's not a bad thing because you're part of them if they hire you. So number 6 is know how to market yourself. And there are many more specific details on how to get through that 3-stage process of getting the job. The third one, before I forget, with regards to the interview, you never know for sure what they're going to ask you in an interview. You just don't. But there are some basic fundamental questions you can prep for, and I highly recommend practicing. Before my interview, I took 2 different days and in a notebook, number 1, research potential questions that were going to be asked. Having been on a few interview committees myself, I actually tried to recall what it was we asked them and what it was that grabbed the interview selection committee's attention. So having that experience is very helpful. And then I practiced responding to these questions and tried to figure out, because a lot of the times you'll go to an interview and they'll ask you a question and you forget of an amazing response you could have given based on your experience. And as you walk out the door, you're kicking yourself because you're like, oh, if only I would have. Well, that's where the preparation is going to benefit you. You won't forget. You're more likely not to forget because you have prepped. So practice. One question that she points out, and I absolutely agree with this, that often is asked at an interview, no matter what the field, is what is your biggest weakness, and how are you either trying to overcome it or have you overcome it? And I did get asked that question. It was actually after I was teaching a class, because they had me teach a class for part of my interview, and they had me assess myself on how I instructed. And they said, what was something that you would change if you went back to that particular lesson? And so it's huge that you're honest about this. No one's perfect, and they want to see that. They want to see your ability to be an objective reflector as much as you possibly can be, and to be real. So be willing to talk about that. Be willing to talk about that. So that's number 6. Know how to market yourself. Number 7 is to become an effective communicator. This is huge in relationships, in our personal lives, as well as professionally, obviously. The last 3 months, I had a series called Life in Tech, and I had a podcast, an episode for each one of them, as well as a transcript on the blog. And I talked about how to better communicate using email, texting, and cell phones, because we are surrounded by technology, and it does help us communicate so long as we use it well. But not just with technology should we know how to communicate well. We should know how to communicate well face-to-face, most importantly, when we give presentations, and the information we share, how we communicate, our style, our tone, our diction. There is so many different approaches, but there are some fundamental ones. The key is to be authentic. The other part of it is to know your audience. And with regards to knowing your audience, that is how you can hit a home run. You're going to know what to say, what not to say. And the backside of this is with regards to the authenticity. If you make promises, follow through. But as we know with life, sometimes promises have to be broken. If that happens, be upfront, be honest, communicate clearly. Don't play games. Don't be manipulative. People will reward you for that in how they respond to you. Now, no one is going to be a perfect communicator. We're going to make mistakes, but as long as we continue to improve and to do our best, that will be hugely significant. So communication is essential to getting what you want, but also building those relationships that are based on trust and authenticity. Those are the relationships in work and in personal life that are worth having. So number 7 is to become an effective communicator. Number 8 is redefine failure. Quote, "It is she who listens to the rest of the world who fails, and it is she who has enough confidence to define success and failure for herself who succeeds." This quote is from Sophia Amoruso, and she too suggests that failure is of our own invention. We are going to take and make many attempts at creating the life that we want, and we're not going to get everything we want all the time or on the first attempt. Each of these opportunities are opportunities for learning lessons, to figure out how to go about it better the next time, to readjust our path, or to become hardened so that we can overcome that obstacle that's giving us fits now. If we look back on our past, we no doubt have made mistakes, but they aren't failures unless we refuse to fix them or learn from them. And we've heard that quote many times, I'm sure. But the key is success on your terms. That's huge. That's what you should be pursuing. Don't try to hit those targets that are set by someone else, set by society. Hit targets beyond or off to the left or off to the right that are in alignment with you. And so what if people aren't applauding? If you can sleep well at night, if you know you're doing your best, and only you can know that, then keep patting yourself on the back and keep striving forward because you're doing something right. You're doing something right. So number 8, redefine failure. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. I had a lot of fun putting this one together. I could have probably talked on a lot longer. This is probably going to be one of our longest episodes. But I think I want to encourage you. I want to encourage you to become that CEO of your own life. You can do it. And it is absolutely liberating. Every once in a while, we'll get into ruts and we'll think, I haven't hit this mark. I haven't done this the right way. Who says? Are you doing that because you're not hitting your marks or someone else's? You know the right path if you'll take the time to listen to yourself. You'll find it. You will find it. It will happen. And enjoy that journey because it really is all about the journey. The destinations are fun to arrive at. But along the way, take pictures, write in your journal, let loose, live in the moment, and be thankful that you have those opportunities because they are amazing. So if you want any of today's show notes, any of those links to those books I talked about along the way, go to the blog, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast40, and you'll find everything there as well as a transcript. Now, do stay tuned because this week's Petite Plaisir is a Francophile film you will want to see. I'll see you on the other side. This week's Petit Plaisir is a film that was originally released in 2010. However, if it's good, it's worth watching whenever the year is, right? So I was recently on my Instagram feed, and I'm always looking for Francophile films in general that are worth watching. And one of my followers on Instagram shared with me Romantics Anonymous. It is a delight. It involves, of course, love, but chocolate as well. And so we have Angelique and Jean-René, who are both very socially timid because they're so sensitive and highly emotional. Highly emotional, though, in the sense that they're aware of other people around them and the situation. And anyway, they come together initially because Angelique applies for a job at a chocolate factory, and Jean-René is the manager of that chocolate factory. I will not reveal anything else. Needless to say, it is lovely, and you will want to eat some chocolates, or you will at least be tempted to eat some chocolates while you're watching this film. I know I enjoyed 2 truffles that night instead of 1. And you can find this film on Amazon Prime for free if you have an Amazon Prime account. Otherwise, you can just go to Amazon and stream it for a couple dollars to watch one night. I don't believe Netflix has it except for on their DVD program, and I'm sure there's other ways to find it as well. But I'll provide a link to the Amazon viewing on today's show notes, podcast 40. Just to let you know, as you would have probably assumed, it is in subtitles, so you can learn French while you're watching. I do hope you've enjoyed this week's Petit Plaisir, where each week ideas are shared to make the everyday all the more enjoyable. Tune in at the end of each Monday's podcast, where I'll recommend a book, a film, or a recipe to help you live more simply, luxuriously. Anything that is a simple pleasure to satiate your sophisticated taste. Thank you for tuning in to the SImple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. For more ideas and inspiration throughout the week, stop by the blog, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com, or pick up the book, Choosing the Simply Luxurious Life, A Modern Woman's Guide. Until next Monday, I'm your host, Shannon Ables. Bonjour!